really, I think that for the Spark and the libraries, we were interested in finding ways in which, together as a partnership, we could develop a project that really saw the libraries as a kind of a creative centre for performance that in itself would, I suppose, support and inspire children to go on and read.
Libraries aren't passive places. They're seen often as a store of books, but what we want to do is develop readers, particularly young readers. We get children seeing books as something that excites them, that develops their reading potential, that develops new ways of looking at books, to be creative themselves, develop themselves as readers and as writers. And again, something like The Tree Child, because of its creativity, its sense of performance, sense of drama, and its magic, can really stimulate children.
I mean, the brilliant thing about performance is that it can really animate stories. It can take you beyond the kind of the written word. And if children are struggling in the first instance with the written word, to have something dramatised, to have those emotions really raw and explicit in front of you, especially in a library setting surrounded by books, one would hope that children would really kind of, beyond the performance, kind of challenge themselves to reach out for a book and to persevere with reading, because I suppose theatre really is a metaphor for what will happen in the mind's eye when you read a book.
This is a whole new development. We've had funding from the Arts Council to develop a performance. It's very much a partnership. It's not just something coming in from the outside that we're showcasing, which has been fantastic. People see real quality and magnitude, exciting events. But this is something that's been developed in Leicester. This is a creative, original project that's had a book, if you like it, it's original, but what it's doing is opening the literature and the imagination involved with the children themselves. I think this is a really important development. It's part of our summer reading challenge, which is our most significant promotion which we do throughout the years, and I very much see as a starting point for future developments, future opportunities to really see creativity coming into our libraries, and that way getting a wider exposure in perhaps a wider range of communities than had been the opportunity before.
I mean, the Spark's role with libraries, it's really about, it is about the partnership work. It's about what the Spark can bring to the libraries. There's a huge amount of knowledge and expertise that the libraries have. So what the Spark have tried to do is to develop those readers into audiences and to find ways in which new audiences become readers. So it's been a real partnership, and I think what the Spark has is the ability to bring in live performance into these community settings, and to not just inspire the children, but hopefully inspire the librarians to consider ways in which they can engage, beyond the performance in storytelling and live performance. The commissioning process was really one of collaboration. We wanted to find a writer that both had really strong ideas and their own voice and their own identity. But it was also really important that they were open to collaboration. Working with Joseph was completely brilliant. He knew how to both collaborate and also feed the process with ideas.
This has been a wonderful opportunity as a writer. It's very rare that you get commissioned to write for a space for such as a library, and that's been a really interesting challenge. The piece is touring around several Leicester libraries, each a different space. We're not going to have lighting rigs, there won't be full blackouts. So that all presents its various challenges and opportunities. We're in working libraries surrounded by books.
We knew we wanted to create something that had been inspired by a book by Patrick Ness called A Monster Calls. And it wasn't in any way about recreating that story, it was just taking some of the themes of that story as a starting point to share with the children.
Been great to collaborate with a director and a designer / puppet maker, and with children. And it's been great to go into sessions with ideas for stories, with scripts, and to hear the children's feedback, and for them to offer ideas, to offer solutions, to offer criticism at times.
The R&D, and that's research and development, we've been doing that in 2 schools. They've written things that have come into the text. I think, for instance, like bone munchers is mentioned in the text, and I know that was said by some child in one of the schools. And the pool that gathers in the tree monster's mouth was again stimulated by somebody who mentioned that. And vampires, they were very keen on vampires.
The story itself is a metaphor for reading. The audience are taken into something that's quite mythical and quite magical, and before you know it, puppets are emerging out of bookcases, and and petals are falling out of books, or pop-up characters are coming out of books. And I think in itself it's a fantastic metaphor for what happens when you read, when you sit down and open a book. Step by step you're kind of being invited to be drawn into the narrative of that fiction, and before you know it, you're in an entirely different landscape, you're feeling a whole range of different emotions, you're empathising with characters that until a minute ago you knew nothing about. And for me that's hugely rewarding, to think that we've created a piece of work that really reflects the process of what it is to read. For us at the Spark, the relationship with children is a really critical one, and it's not just children as audience members or spectators, it's about really seeing the value in children themselves as artists. And so the relationship between taking an artist into a school and seeing how children respond to working with those artists is really important for the Spark, because it gives us a better understanding of how we might engage emotionally and intellectually with children.
The opportunity of working with the Sparks has been a real privilege for the children at our school. I felt that their experiences of live theatre is quite limited, so it gave them a real insight into how the whole process works, working with real directors, artists, writers.
One of the biggest differences with Tree Child compared to other projects that I've worked on was the opportunity to collaborate with children as part of the writing process. Often you're commissioned to write a play for young people, and then the first time you get their feedback or you get their responses is when it's up and running on the first night.
Since working with the Spark, I noticed there were some children who were usually quite reserved, a bit shy about, even in the classroom, reading a character's description or reading out of a book, but they became more confident.
We want to be working with children in a school setting. We want to be looking at the ways in which the arts and creativity and culture, and in this instance how fiction and literature can really have an impact on their learning. How do we get them to want to be involved in literature and fiction, in thinking about themselves as storytellers and story makers, and thinking about themselves as characters that can go on a whole multitude of adventures, and what in turn that can do for their learning, how through this process of creativity they can learn something new about the world.
Our approach with any sort of creativity and writing is a lot more structured. The whole idea that this has been very sort of open, where children have been able to throw ideas into the mix, asked to elaborate on their ideas, and really sort of respected and given ownership of those ideas. And the whole play coming together, the Tree Child, has allowed children to feel as if their ideas that the children have given are valued. And when they saw the final piece coming together of Tree Child, I think it gave them great ownership of that piece, and they were a lot more interested and felt the whole piece had substance to it because they'd had contributed to it.
There's one session where the children listened to a rehearsed reading of the script for an hour, and they weren't fidgeting or bored because they were recognising parts of the story. They knew the characters, they were there right at the beginning, and that was really lovely to see.
We don't often have an opportunity in schools to have time to work on children's creativity, because we're looking at the structural elements of the arts and writing and the composition of that, and this has been a lot more raw and substantial, I think. And I think looking at the end product, it's actually something that's been very worthwhile in the long run for the children involved.
What I've really liked and enjoyed about the Tree Child is that I feel that the process is really reflected in the final product. We wanted to create something that itself was a real, a fantastic story. Potentially could be a great piece of literature if we wanted to turn it into a book.
There are lots of choices to be made about how the story's told. You could do it without any set and without any props. If you say to an audience, and she went through a hole in a bookcase and emerged into a forest, maybe an actor can do that without anything. Or maybe we want a prop to help that. Maybe we want sound to help that. So it's trying to find when those visual moments are and what they are.
The story's changed quite a bit since we started the process. Quite early on, the story was about two characters, a boy and a girl, ending up in a forest and meeting a tree monster. Over time, as we worked with the children, it felt more right that it was one child's story, and that's Delilah, the heroine of Tree Child.
The one thing I really like about the story is the idea of going into an adventure through a library. I like that idea that the library is this portal to another universe. You know, it's a place where you can find yourself having all kinds of adventures.
Yes, what's been great about the project is just this idea of this story slowly emerging, and every time we went back to the children, the last few times, we had more of it to share with them. What I like about the story is the way it has been informed by all those layers of experience that we've had. So, and I think that even for an audience who doesn't know where those things have come from, it does feel very textured. And it does mean it's quite complex and layered, and has all these layers in terms of the language as well, and where that language has come from.
I also really like that, you know, we wanted for the work to be housed in libraries, and it legitimately is. It doesn't feel like we're a theatre company coming in with a set. The children and the audience stumble upon the story. They really do think that Dan is the librarian and that Bhavana is a young child coming in to use the library. So that sense of it happens, the story emerges in that space, has been really important and something I really enjoy.